What's the word, YouTube fam? Welcome back to the channel. You are now tuning into Wait a Minute TV. Man, I just got back in from watching Sinners, which is written, produced, and directed by no other than Ryan Coogler. He is most recognized and highly praised for producing award-winning movies such as Black Panthers 1 and 2 and Creed 1, 2, and 3. This movie also stars the world-renowned actor Michael B. Jordan. Man, I gotta say, they went 30 for 30 with this movie. This movie was excellent. I mean, chef's kiss, you hear me? It did not disappoint at all. I am a huge fan of the horror movie genre, especially vampire movies, with some of my notable favorites being 30 Days of Night, From Dusk Till Dawn, and of course, Blade. I'm also a fan of the Afro-surrealism genre, with notable movies like Jordan Peele's Get Out and Donald Glover's Atlanta TV series. This movie was a perfect blend of period drama, horror, and Afro-surrealism all wrapped into one, along with some very thought-provoking social commentary. In the very beginning of the movie, we get a prologue that sets up the supernatural elements that we encounter later within this movie. The film is set in 1932 in the Jim Crow South of Clarksdale, Mississippi. The story follows twin brothers, Smoke and Stack, both portrayed by Michael B. Jordan, who are World War I veterans, who return to their hometown to establish a juke joint. Their plans are disrupted when they encounter Remick, a vampire musician who seeks to exploit black creativity, and his followers. The film explores themes of cultural appropriation, historical trauma, and the resilience of black artistry. Coogler masterfully blends genres, starting with a dramatic period piece and evolving into a visceral horror thriller, highlighting themes of racial violence, generational trauma, and survival. What I want to start with in the breakdown of this movie is pointing out some of the key elements and symbolism that I noticed, what some of the messages were that I took away from this movie, and what I believe the deeper meaning to the ending was. Now, before I continue, I have to warn you that this is a spoiler-filled review. So, if you haven't watched the movie already, I advise that you pause this video, go watch the movie, and then return for this review. With that being said, this movie has a lot to unpack. So have a seat, grab a snack, and let's get right into it. The first thing that I would like to start off with is the symbolism. I love that Ryan Coogler decided to color code the twins to help the audience distinguish the difference between the two. Smoke, of course, wore the color blue, which is a cool color, with cool being very indicative of his personality. He was a man who was about his business. And even though he was a sinner, he represented more of a level-headed person. Stack, in contrast, wore the color red, which is a warm or hot color, with hot also being very indicative of his personality. He was about his business too, but he liked to live more on the wild side. He loved to party and indulge in about every carnal temptation you could possibly imagine. I love how their names were respectively Smoke and Stack, which if you put those together, it becomes the term smokestack, which is a small vertical chimney that's typically found on industrial structures like factories and ships. I believe that this was a slight nod to the period of time that they lived in, which would have been considered at the time the second industrial revolution boom. Also, the fact that chimneys blow smoke. And you know what they say about smoke. Wherever there's smoke, there's fire, which I also believe is a nod to the destruction that the twins brought with them everywhere they went. Now, if you pay close attention in the beginning when they were preparing to set up the juke joint, Stack was the one pushing for them to have a grand opening the same night, knowing they had just got back to Mississippi from Chicago earlier that day. We saw Stack's very assertive and strong personality, which rivaled Smoke's cool, calm, and calculated personality. Smoke specialized in thinking, and Stack specialized in doing. The one thing that life has taught me, though, is that you never want to do anything too hastily, because as the saying goes, haste makes waste. They shouldn't have pushed for the juke joint to be open that early on. As the audience, once we saw that Smoke agreed to do this against his better judgment, we knew that something terrible was about to happen. But I also know, having lived in Chicago, born and raised myself, that getting a taste of that city life, everything moves fast and quick, which is typically how things get done. and they'd be able to turn a profit, which was their ultimate goal. Now, the first thing I noticed immediately, as soon as they put the plan to motion to start up their juke joint, was the movie's reference to the 7 deadly sins. For those of you who are not familiar, the 7 deadly sins are lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. The twins use other people's vices against them, such as sex, money, music, drugs, and gambling, to lure them into working for them at their juke joint, to get each one they recruited to indulge in one of the 7 deadly sins. Stack lured Slim in with the booze when the money and the music didn't work. He used gluttony to hook him. Smoke lured Grace and her husband in with money. They already had a profitable business in the community, so any extra money was just that, extra. They were hooked by greed. Mary was lured in by lust under the guise of love, and to an extent so was Annie. Pearline was hooked by lust, of course, and a little bit of pride in the music. Stack attempted to lure Cornbread in with money, but when he realized that that wouldn't work, he started antagonizing him with lustful thoughts about his own wife. However, his wife was the one that was subdued by persuasion of him making money, considering the fact that they weren't making a lot of money because all they did was pick cotton to make a living. I believe that Cornbread was a representation of sloth, and he could have very well been hooked by lust and greed. The twins recruited their little cousin Sammy, also known as Preacher Boy, through the music, which I believe was the most important and crucial part of this tale, because he was hooked with pride. The townspeople, of course, were definitely hooked with gluttony, greed, and lust. The twins themselves were hooked by greed for money and lust for power, because what they figured out was their only way to maintain power was through money, seeing as the society that they lived in was looking to take power away from them every chance they got it. The truth of the matter is, the twins led every single black person in that town to their ultimate demise using the 7 deadly sins. The other symbolism that was on point in this movie was the African heritage and culture that were heavily present. There were spiritual references that were prevalent and hard to ignore as well. There were elements of voodoo and even hoodoo. Now, I am not an expert on these two practices, but from what I researched, it seems that voodoo is more focused on spiritual and religious aspects, whereas hoodoo is focused more on using the environment around you to heal oneself from any spiritual or physical ailments alike. We saw this when Annie prayed over the mojo to protect Smoke from any spirits that were looking to harm him. Also, I love how spiritually in tune Annie was with the ancestors and the ancestral plane. I believe that Annie was a representation of good magic, because voodoo is oftentimes looked at or seen as bad or dark magic. I believe that Sammy was a representation of the good, innocent, and righteous man that is all too often tempted by sin. As Sammy's father, who was a preacher, said, "You keep dancing with the devil, one day he gonna follow you home," which is a very old saying that I believe set the tone for this entire story, because every single last person in this movie had some form of dance with the devil, but that dance cost each and every one of them dearly. As the sun's going down, we see the vampire Remick and how he got his stride. He was being hunted by some of the Native Americans as he stumbled across this Ku Klux Klan couple. I also noticed that when Remick turned the KKK couple into vampires, he was able to hook them with their anger and hatred for anybody who wasn't them or their kind. I believe that the vampires were a metaphor for the evil that consumes us when we indulge in sin. I personally believe that sin is a ship that will sail you to an abyss of eternal darkness. And if sin is the ship, music is the anchor. Now, the music itself isn't inherently evil, but depending on how you use it and where you use it, it can either access the light or the dark, the good or the bad, which is what I believe the movie was trying to tell us. The vampires were attracted to the music because it allowed them to revel in their sins and access dark realms. I absolutely love the scene where Sammy starts playing music in the juke joint. We got to see it open up the realm between past, future, and present all at once, being able to see our African ancestors as well as our descendants. I noticed that the more the music intensified, the more the town folks were dancing. And they even showed symbolism of the roof literally being on fire, which is a figure of speech meaning that the party is lit, or as us Chicagoans like to say, the party was overbust, simply meaning that the party was good or enjoyable. The vampires being attracted to the music for their own benefit also spoke to how large corporations seek to feed off of raw talent within the music industry, especially raw black talent. Sam was the raw black talent, and Remick was the antithesis, which would be the corporate exec looking to exploit his talent for their own personal gain. That's why Remick wanted him the most. Another thing that I noticed was how well Ryan Coogler was able to incorporate real life history into the narrative. The treacherous ways of Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan in the South at that time, how the economy was. Back then, $20 was a lot of money. If my research serves me correct, $20 back then was like $400 now. The vibes and the pure aesthetic of this small southern country town, the heavy racial undertones, the fact that there was a thriving Asian business in a community that was seemingly predominantly African American, the struggle that biracial blacks often faced. For example, I love that Sammy was able to peep right away that Mary had some black in her. I could personally tell you as a black person that we always know when someone's one of us. It don't matter where we at. They did an excellent job with showing us how the KKK tried to finesse the twin brothers with the property that they sold them, that at the end of the day they were never really willing to give up. Now I want to talk a little bit about the message that I believe this movie was trying to leave with us. The message that I essentially took from this movie was that your sin by default will exploit you. It will put you in an undesirable situation or position every time. Be very wary of the lifestyle that you entertain, because it very well may be your detriment and downfall. As we saw in the movie, the demons can't enter unless they're invited in, and your own sinful actions can definitely be interpreted as invitations. I also believe that this was social commentary on how African Americans have been exploited by economical and political greed, and how that exploitation has destroyed so many of our communities in one fell swoop. It has also caused us in some ways to exploit ourselves for personal gain of money and power. Last but not least, I want to speak on what I believe the deeper meaning of the ending was. By the end of this movie, I realized that this was not Stack and Smoke's story, but it was Sammy's. At the end of the movie, we see that Smoke got up with the KKK members that were planning to ambush him and his brother and kill them for the property they had originally sold them. He ends up killing them after he was able to kill most of the vampires right before they arrived. However, this was somewhat a Pyrrhic victory for Smoke, because although he got his get back, it was at the cost of his own life. I think that the most compelling scene in this movie was when Smoke was dying from the gunshot wound that he attained during his shootout with the KKK. He was greeted by Annie, and it was revealed to us that they had a child that had passed away. I thought that this was an exceptional and wildly beautiful scene, because he would finally reunite with his family as a whole in the ancestral plane. I'd even go as far to say that this scene was my favorite scene of the entire movie, because it was nothing like I had ever seen before. Smoke was finally able to shed the sinful life and be at peace. We later see that Sammy was able to live out his full life as a successful blues musician. In October of 1992, he was greeted by two vampires, one being his cousin Stack, the other being Mary. He's shocked to see that they survived all these years, and he asked Stack how. And that's when Stack revealed to him that Smoke spared him and forced him to promise to allow Sammy to live out the entirety of his life. They stop by to listen to Sammy play some of the music from his father's rebuilt guitar. And then afterwards, they just leave him alone. Now, I think they left him alone for a few reasons. One, he was old, so he was closer to death than most. Two, which I think is the most important part, Sammy had let go of his life of sin, which made it harder for them to probably find him or feed on him. And three, by the time 1992 rolled around, there was enough sin in the world to keep Mary and Stack full. I believe that Sammy ended generational curses for his family in exchange for generational blessings. Now, I know I didn't cover every single thing in this movie because of how layered it was. I'm going to personally have to watch this movie again to catch certain things that I didn't catch before. So feel free to chime in on anything you feel like I may have missed down in the comments. This film had amazing world building and thoroughly fleshed out characters. This film features a strong ensemble cast, including Haley Steinfeld, Miles Cadden, Jack O'Connell, Wumi Mosaku, and of course, Delroy Lindo. Michael B. Jordan did an excellent job as the twins, and his performance as the brothers is enhanced by a real-life set of twins by the name of Noah and Logan Miller, ensuring authenticity in portraying the twin bond. I think that this concept was fresh, unique, and exciting. Ryan Coogler has now proven that he can make a boxing film, a superhero movie film, and now a horror film. You all let me know down in the comments what your thoughts on the movie were. What did you like? What did you dislike? And what did you notice? Please hit that like button, share and subscribe. And until next time, YouTube fam, I'm out.